Mr. President, one of the greatest public health challenges that we're facing in the world today is the pandemic of AIDS in Africa, increasingly in India and the subcontinent, spreading as well into China, also in the Soviet Union. But it's most dramatically expressed in the neediest and the poorest countries of the world. And I think Africa has been on the minds of many of us here in the United States Senate about how we were going to respond and how we were really going to provide international leadership. The United States has been a country that has developed a variety of different medications over the period of recent years, as well as a treatment in a wide variety of different kinds of AIDS cases, particularly in the areas of pediatric AIDS, other types of challenges that have affected those with with HIV, excuse me. And and we are now involved in responding to the real challenge of Kofi Annan and the world community in providing world leadership and providing funding and being replicated by other countries. We still have a long ways to go, but I think many of us who watch this and develop in terms of our the breadth of the support from our members have been impressed that we are finally beginning to measure up, although I think we do have a long ways to go. Having said that, one of the great challenges that these countries have is acquiring the various kind of prescription drugs that they need. And one of the issues that would be presented should this legislation be passed and signed into law still would be, what is the availability of some of these generic drugs that might provide life-saving circumstance to millions of people around the world if they were able to be produced, these countries that do not have the resources to buy the brand name drugs. And the question has been is whether these countries that are facing this kind of extraordinary crisis would be able to issue what is called a compulsory license that would permit them to buy generic drugs that are being either produced or can be produced in their own country or in another country. And that has been very much at issue. This amendment, which I would offer myself and a number of our colleagues, would make it very clear that if the country itself issues what is called a compulsory license based upon the critical need that they are facing, public health disaster that they are facing, that this would not be considered to be a violation of the trade laws, and they would be able to either develop that capability within the country or, for example, if we're talking about Botswana that has a high incidence of HIV and AIDS, be able to make contracts with other countries and purchase a generic, which they would be interested in doing, as I understand, with Brazil or other nations. It's perhaps, in many respects, one of the most important clarifications that we can have in terms of the healthcare crisis of HIV and of AIDS. It will make this provision will make a very, very substantial difference. This kind of cloudiness that currently surrounds this issue will be eliminated with this amendment. The amendment is very simple. It ensures that those countries hit hardest by the AIDS crisis and other public health emergencies will have access to the affordable medicines to address these crises. It does this by expressing support for the Doha Declaration on TRIPS and the public health as adopted by the World Trade Organization last November. The Doha Declaration was supported by Ambassador Zolik, the pharmaceutical industry, and thousands of public health advocates and religious leaders It's one of the most important global health issues that we face today, and I'm pleased that we could address this in a bipartisan manner. I'll submit a more complete statement for the record, but I want to acknowledge and thank the chairman, Senator Baucus, and Senator Grassley for and their staffs for the willingness to consider this amendment. I know we have, at the current time, I'm not going to ask that the current amendment be temporarily set aside, but I have had the opportunity to talk with the chairman. The ranking member was not present at the floor just earlier, but with his staff. And so at an appropriate time, and I'll leave it up to the managers to work out what is the appropriate time, I would hope that this might be considered favorably. As I say, this is a matter of enormous importance, incredible consequence. It really will result in the savings of, I think, hundreds of thousands of lives, and it is something that needs to be clarified in an important way. And I welcome the strong bipartisan support, as I've mentioned, from my colleagues on both sides of the aisle who've supported this proposal. And I think it's something that will be enormously welcomed by the neediest countries in the world.
Mr. President. Mr. President.
The senator from Montana.
What's the regular order?
Further debate on Amendment 3408.
Mr. President, I ask for the regular order.
If not, the question occurs on the amendment. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it.
Reconsider.
The amendment is agreed to. Without objection. The senator from Massachusetts.
Then is it appropriate? Is it? I'll send my amendment to the desk and ask for it.
The clerk will report.
Thank you. I think he's.
The senator from Massachusetts, Mr. Kennedy, proposes an amendment number 3411 to amendment number 3401. Section 2102B.
I'd ask the further reading to be dispensed with.
Without objection.
As I mentioned earlier, we've very appreciative of the cooperation that we've had as a matter of enormous importance and consequence in the areas of public health. This amendment will make a major difference, and I thank the chairman of the Finance Committee and the ranking member for his favorable consideration.
Mr. President,
Senator from Iowa.
it's my intention to back the amendment, but I'd like to say that this amendment makes an important contribution to the underlying Trade Promotion Authority bill. Before addressing the substance of the amendment, I'd like to put it in context. The Doha Ministerial held in Qatar last year was a profound breakthrough for the United States and for the World Trade Organization. For the first time in many years, over 130 nations came together to launch a new round of international trade negotiations. This is no small achievement, as virtually every action taken during the Doha Ministerial had to be done by consensus. But these nations strongly believe that a new round of international trade negotiations were in their best interest, and I also agree that it is in their best interest. It's in the best interest of the United States. I also think it is in our best interest to get these negotiations underway and give the President the authority that he needs to negotiate the best deals for our farmers, workers, small and large businesses. During the WTO Ministerial in Doha, the members of the organization adopted a political declaration that highlights the provisions in the TRIPS agreement that provide members with the flexibility to address public health emergencies, such as the epidemics of HIV, AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. The objectives on intellectual property, which are part of this bill, were drafted before completion of the Doha Ministerial. Senator Kennedy's amendment updates these objectives to take into account the important declaration on public health made at the Doha meeting. It is a good addition to the bill, and I'm pleased to accept it.
Senator from Montana.
Mr. President, I highly compliment the Senator from Massachusetts for what he's doing here. This is an extremely important statement. There are millions of people in the world who are suffering from HIV and AIDS, and the current patent protection that drug companies have, as important it is a measure that should be relaxed so that people can get, in many parts of the world, can get assistance. The amendment recognizes the special declaration concerning public health that was adopted last November in Doha. And the special declaration provided that insurance to poor countries facing the immense challenges of dealing with public health emergencies caused by pandemics of infectious diseases like HIV and AIDS, the measures necessary to address such crises in these countries can be accommodated by the WTO TRIPS agreement, and that's the agreement on trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights. This assurance complements the numerous commitments that the United States government and its public and private sectors have made to help these countries cope with the HIV/AIDS pandemic. WTO members have used the declaration to affirm their commitment to effective intellectual property standards, such as those in the TRIPS agreement, and this declaration recognizes that effective intellectual property standards serve an important public health objective of stimulating development of new drugs. And I highly recommend this amendment to the Senate.
Is there further debate on the amendment? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Amendment